In this interview, I meet up with Bonnie Landry. She is a homeschool mom of Vancouver Island. She and her husband raised and are still raising 7 children aged 14 to 33, none of whom ever have been to school. She is a speaker and an author in the homeschool world, and she is an advocate of joy. Let's welcome Bonnie. Thank you, Bonnie, for joining me today. So
For
awesome
having
to
me.
have you here. I want to start by asking you, you have 7 children who you've been homeschooling. So
Yes.
I want to ask you, how do you balance being a mom and being an educator for them? How do you keep that role separate? Like sometimes.
Well, ultimately, I don't keep the roles separate. So I think that if we approach homeschooling as a lifestyle, we can't separate I'm the teacher now and I'm the mom now. Okay. I am your mom who teaches you, right?
Yeah.
And we have to work with that reality as opposed to sort of imagining that we're playing two different roles. And so in the same way, I'm an advocate of, everything that we teach our kids. So everything is education. Everything we teach our kids is in some way just teaching them a new skill or skill set, right? So personal hygiene, how to make your bed, how to be polite to grownups, how to have a social life, how to do algebra, how to write a paragraph. It's all the same thing. They come into the world unsocialized, and our job is to socialize them, and their education, what we think of as sort of their academic education, is part of that, creating them, forming them, helping them to be a functional member of society. And so if we see the whole picture, okay, teaching algebra, teaching to write a paragraph, teaching a child to read is just another skill set, right? So yeah, so that's my take on that, is that we don't separate the two jobs.
Okay, awesome.
It might be worth mentioning that what I think is very important to clarify is that when I'm sitting down with my kids to teach them something, and I'm going to use the framework of academia for this, but really anything that if we really want to teach them a new thing, we don't do other things while we're teaching that thing. Right? So I want to make sure that I'm not being distracted by the dishwasher that needs loading or the load of laundry that needs to be put on. So there's a time for those things. But if I focus on this now, it's much more efficient than trying to get my, sort of household work done when I'm trying to teach you. And I think the most important part of that is not only is that more efficient to, I'm going to spend this time doing dictation with you or doing math with you or reading to you, not being distracted by other things. Shut your phone off. Don't let things ding at you. Knowing that when you spend your time with your child, they're less needy. That's one thing, okay? And it gives us more time to do then the household things that we need to do. But also we teach our children to be attentive by being attentive, and so if we're constantly being distracted in our various things that we're teaching them, forming them throughout our day, we are teaching them to be distracted and not to be attentive to us. So it first starts here. And so that to me is a really important part of our mom role, and that's in teaching anything, academics or personal hygiene or whatever it is we're teaching them. Yeah,
You have to be the role model for them.
exactly, always, right?
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
One of the things that comes up a lot, and when someone says I'm going to homeschool, or someone is homeschooling, is the socialization of your kids, right? Like it's going to be taken away. They're afraid of it. How did you foster that in your family with 7 kids?
Well, we have 7 kids, so you can see
that's socialization.
that's one way. So I recommend having a big family. Excuse me, I'm just gonna something on my glasses. I think that a lot of socialization happens within the family, but I also think it's really important to build yourself a community.
Yeah.
And so your community doesn't need to be very large. So ultimately, when you think about your own schooling years, or you think about your kids in school, there's usually 2 or 3 or 4 people that they become really good friends with, right? They don't need 30 friends. Okay, none of us really do. You know, we need, I mean, we have a social circle, but in terms of the people that we really share our life with, that's a fairly small group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, if you can foster for yourself a homeschool community, a community of families, that's really important. It doesn't need to be 25 families. It doesn't need to be 10 families, but, you know, 1, 2, 3 families. That's what's really important, is to, you know, and ideally, in an ideal world, we are actually friends with the whole family, so that, you know, we do things together. We go on picnics together. We have them over for dinner. We take field trips together. Whatever it is we do in our homeschool life, that we're fostering lifetime friendships. That is our family friendships. That's in an ideal world. We don't live in an ideal world. And so sometimes, you know, that's difficult, more difficult to find. Or, you know, one example might be, say, parents have the same age children, but the parents are, you know, 10, 15 years older than their peers, you know, also raising kids the same age. You know, it doesn't always work out that we are able to, you know, have those kinds of family friendships. So how do we seek out, you know, friendships then for our children? And I think that what's really important there is to, you know, have them in activities that are of interest to them, that are wholesome. You know, we want our kids to be in wholesome activities. We know lots of homeschoolers who've put their kids in cadets. 4-H has been a huge benefit to many homeschoolers. 4-H is a really wholesome educational platform, and I think that really a person could almost exclusively do 4-H and really dive into it, and that would be cover almost all of your curriculum, because 4-H is so sort of language oriented and public speaking oriented and education oriented themselves. And there are many, many ways. You don't have to be in a rural area in order to be involved in 4-H. There are, you know, 4-H for gardening, 4-H for handcrafts, you know, 4-H for many different platforms. So look in your area. That's a beautiful way to expose your kids to family friendships. And peer friendships, and also things like soccer, you know, various local sports that aren't necessarily school-centered sports. Those are ways that you can build your child's community, you know, and if they have opportunity to meet friends, often they'll end up meeting other homeschool friends via those things, right? You know, but get involved in your local homeschool communities. Homeschool communities are a little harder to get into these days because a lot of our community is online, you know, and if you don't have a community, try to build one yourself. If there isn't a community, you know, just say, I'm a homeschool mom. We're going to meet at the park on, you know, Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock if you want to join us. And you'll find that there's often people who are looking for the same sort of ideology for community, just that they want to meet up with people in real life.
Yeah, if there is an initiate one, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's so much easy now to organize one.
Exactly. Yeah. Start a little Facebook group, right?
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
For sure. The next question I have is about curriculum. Like, you know, you have 7 kids, and, you know, how do you choose that curriculum? And, you know, everyone learns differently, right? Every child learns differently. How did you adjust that? Did you just have one, or did you have multiple different?
Well, I think that I start off really the first few years without curriculum at all. And I think that the advantage of that is it helps you to understand how your child learns. It helps you to save money. It helps you to really kind of explore what education is and how you can best foster and aid the education of your child, so that as they get a little older and curriculum becomes more important, say you get beyond the scope of what you're able to teach yourself, or what you're comfortable teaching yourself, that you have a better sense of maybe what's going to work for your child. You know, so I'm first of all going to break this down a little bit. If I can offer some resources for how to go about doing that, and then maybe talk about a few different curricula that we used over time with our kids. So first of all, the book that really got me started on being able to teach children without curriculum was developed by a set of 3 little books. They now come as one book, called The 3 R's by Ruth Beechick. really lovely. She talks about the natural inductive approach to learning,
Mm.
and sort of walks parents through how we can learn all subject areas simply by kind of our day-to-day things that we're doing with our kids, how to create a rich learning environment so that it happens more naturally, how to begin developing a kind of a structure for your day without a lot of top-down education, right? It's a very sort of organic approach to education. That book is worth its weight in gold as far as I'm concerned. So it's available on Amazon. I started doing a workshop years ago, kind of exploring with parents how to go about doing this, right? How you can educate your children without a lot of curriculum. And it's easier to make your homeschooling life relationship centered and joy centered when you're able to work without curriculum. Bring the curriculum has its place, but bring it in later when you've really sort of got a handle on this. So that workshop during COVID, I ended up, after 20 years of doing it, I ended up having it professionally videoed and produced. And I did that about 4 years ago. During COVID, I actually made that a free product now. So it's available on YouTube. And I think I gave you the link to it to put in your notes. But if not, people can go on my website. It links to that video. The workshop is really intended. It's a full day workshop, so it's broken into 4 parts, but it's really intended to walk you through what that looks like. And then it talks again, as the kids get older, curriculum choices and whatnot. I think that would be a really good place for people to start exploring the idea of how do I get my feet wet with this without spending a lot of money on curriculum. So, those resources, sort of how to start out that way as one side. As we started moving into curriculum, one of the best things you can do is talk to other homeschooling parents. Okay. What worked for your child with math? What kind of learner are they? Are they auditory? Are they tactile? What homeschool programs are out there? You'll find that there's, 2 or 3 or 4 curricula that you'll hear over and over again, that, oh, my kid's really tactile. This worked really well for me. My kid is a very auditory learner. My kid has a hard time sitting still, right? These are the kinds of things that you're going to hear, and these are the kinds of programs you're going to be exposed to. So talking to other homeschool moms is really your best bet. There's also a lot of information in Facebook groups. It's a little bit hard to find information. You sort of have to sift through. But if you can put in, a lot of Facebook groups will have a little search bar in them. What are you looking for? Math programs. And then somebody will have done a blog post that it sort of compares the different math programs and helps you find out what might work for your child. But when it boils down to it, you'll find that there's really a few curricula in various subject areas that people really appreciate. And what works for your family is really important. And I think that when we're homeschooling, we want to make it as efficient as possible, right? So we don't want to divide our children up. For the subjects that we can, if we can family-centered, we'll learn in a family-centered way where our time is much more efficient. So some subjects don't work very well that way, like math, because you're building on skills and moving forward as you go up, as you will know. And but things like history or science even, our family-centered learning is really great for those subject areas. And so if you can, I talk a lot about that in the video as well. And there's a big move towards that sort of literature-based learning or project-based learning, that we can bring the family together on those subject areas. Of course, you're going to be, when you're teaching a group of people that range maybe in age from 5 to 15, if you have a big family, there's going to be different skill levels involved, but you can address those things very easily. Math is much more linear, right? Yeah. And so those are some thoughts.
Was there an age, you said that you didn't start bringing in curriculum? Is there an age that is specific?
Really depended on the child. I would say the first thing I brought curriculum in with was math. And so for me, I did probably usually the first 3-4 years, I would work without curriculum, and you'd be very tactile. I call it chocolate chip math. I've written a little booklet on that, that's on Amazon. The idea being that you use, a few chocolate chips, and you make math very tactile, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, fractions. There's a lot you can do with 20 chocolate chips,
Yes.
and the chocolate chips are not intended as a reward. They get to eat them at the end of the lesson, right? But it's intended as a very tactile, fun, cozy way of approaching a math ideology that is simple and fun, and is attractive to the children. And then so it's not based on, they don't get the chocolate chips based on their performance, right? They just eat the chocolate chips. And then I usually would move from that into symbols and paper. So the same things that we were talking about, I would move into paper. When we say 2 chocolate chips and 3 chocolate chips, this is the sign that means and, or this is the sign that means take away. Introduce it that way, and then proceed from then into some sort of text. Depending on the child, some kids were much more inclined to be content with a workbook or a textbook at a younger age. Some people, look at a 1-inch textbook that they're, going to cover for the year, and they, kind of get wound up about that. So, then we have to break it down. Not that we can't use the text. As the mom, if my child is going to feel a bit wiggy at the age of, 9, about this big math book that they have to get through, I can just break it down. I can pull the lessons out of it and just say, okay, this is what we're learning today. We're learning long division, and this week we're going to spend on long division and go through the steps with them, but pull it out of
bigger package,
the text, as I sort of, because I wouldn't necessarily know what to do next, right? And again, with science, we proceed. At some point, my kids usually started sort of science curriculum a little older, maybe between 10 and 12. And certainly for high school, they would move into a science textbook. So most of their high school was done more with curriculum than their younger years, for sure.
Yeah, it is something that most, when they start out homeschooling, most people fear that, like, what should I choose? Which one should I choose? And what if I choose the wrong one? But there is no wrong and right? You just kind of have to play with it.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
And a really important note about curriculum is that if it's not working for your family, don't push it, right? Don't push the curriculum question. The other thing is, don't let the curriculum own you. Okay. And I'll use math, and this is something I'm sure you can speak to.
Yes.
I'll use math as an example. You have a math text, and it's been developed, say, for a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old. And whoever's developed that curriculum has to make some assumptions about what a 12-year-old might know and what they might need to know. And they're working with that. But of course, we know that there's no 12-year-old on the planet who fits precisely into that particular textbook. Some things are going to be easy for them. Some things they're just not mentally ready to absorb yet. And so don't push. If you don't make the child do 3 modules on fractions when they know it, right? Maybe do the end of the module quizzes just to make sure that they understand what's going on. But if they understand something, don't make them do that. It's a waste of time, right? Do a bit of review with them, but don't waste their time. Don't waste your time. And don't make math boring because they're having to repeat things they already know. On the other side of that coin, don't push something they are not ready to understand right now. Right. So break down, have them carry them for, and I don't know your method exactly, but reading what I read, what I gathered was that we were similar in our ideologies about this sort of thing, that break it down as much as you can, give them the pieces, but don't try and make their brain understand something it's not ready to understand. Right. And sometimes you can try 2 or 3 different angles on what will help us understand this concept. But sometimes you hit a brick wall anyway, and 6 months down the road, they might understand it just like that, So, we don't always know when they're going to be ready. But, you can do something like, get some help from yourself, get some help from Khan Academy. Okay, we're not understanding this particular concept. What are some ways we can approach it? If you hit a brick wall, move on, revisit it the following year. Right.
Exactly. And make it, the math is something that you have to really make it simple, right? Like, it's not you got to simplify it as much as possible in every way possible. And
Yeah.
it's not, sometimes it takes time. Like you introduce something, it has to sink in. You have to let it, right, to your kids. It takes
Yeah,
time. Turn it on, turn, no, it's
exactly. And sometimes memorizing things that you don't fully understand, you can do the steps, and the understanding actually comes a little later.
later.
You know, if you can do the steps, like, oh, when you have that moment of dawning, right? Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, yeah. So we just can't push. So don't let curriculum own you is the main thought behind all of that ramble is, you know, let it support you, let it support your child, but don't let it become a problem for you, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And next thing I want to ask about, how do you make sure, like, one of the other thing that, homeschool parents always struggle with is the credentials to enter post-secondary education. How do I make sure that they got it all, if they're going
Right.
to apply to post-secondary, how do I make sure they got all
Right,
the
that we leave that
requirements?
door open. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yes.
That's a great question. I'm actually doing a little blog series on that right now, which I'm pretty excited about.
Mhm.
So essentially, my children don't have a graduation diploma, okay? And depending on the province or state that you're homeschooling in, sometimes that's a non-issue. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's an issue, you know, that you have a choice to make. You could either have your child finish up their grade 12 without a diploma or with a diploma, okay? I'm assuming that your audience is going beyond BC here, so
Yeah.
I'll keep it general. I'll keep the comments general. So none of my kids have a high school diploma per se, okay? What they do have is a developed by mom high school transcript,
Mhm.
okay? What we have found, my kids have been accepted in various homeschool post-secondary institutions, okay?
Mhm.
Um, what most post-secondary places want is to see a transcript that reflects normal graduation requirements, okay? That will vary, and I'll go and get into this in the blog posts. That will vary from state to state, province to province, institution to institution, okay? But we see some generalities, okay? They want usually 3 or 4 years of high school recorded, okay? They want English for every year. They want a science, 9, 10, 11. They want a math, 9, 10, 11. They want social studies, 9, 10, 11, 12. And they want a certain amount of core credits and a certain amount of elective credits. So your core credits are going to be the subject areas that are sort of the normal course that your kids have to take. The elective credits is completely wide open in terms of what they can take, but they need a certain amount of credits in order to have a full transcript, okay? And so there's a lot of sort of confusion about credits. Credits, the language of credits varies from place to place. And so in BC, we're on a 4-credit system. So one full year course is 4 credits. In university, one full semester course is a 3-credit course. In Ontario, it's a 1-credit system. If you do a full course, it's a 1-credit system. So that's a little bit confusing for parents. But there's a lot of help out there. So what I've done in these blog posts, I've only got 2 done, but I'll be doing a couple more, is I talk about electives, I talk about core courses, I talk about how to develop a transcript, okay? And what I've done is made up a little free PDF worksheet so that kids can, and parents can print one for each year with the idea that they write down everything the child does. So they can use it for both planning purposes and record keeping purposes, right? So what you want to do is probably around, grade 8 or grade 9, be talking with your child about, okay, if you in BC want a diploma, this is what that will look like. If that's not important to you, you can maybe talk with them about what, the difference between the two, how their education might look. If you live in an area where you just need a transcript, a diploma is not really what you get as a homeschooler. Okay, this is what a transcript needs to look like. How can we approach that? What are some things that you feel like you can work on independently? Are there some classes that you might want to take online? We've avoided online schooling a lot. But in the last couple of years of high school, what I found that I really appreciate is some online live classes so that my kids can get used to learning from somebody who isn't me.
Yeah.
Right? And producing material for somebody who isn't me. right? And that is something that I didn't do with my first 3 kids, and the kids after that I started doing. And I think that that's a really important
It's a
thing, a
good
skill.
transition, right? It's a good
Yeah,
transition.
exactly. Exactly. So that they, have a sense of what that might be like, even though it's online. I mean, you could even do a couple of, actually in like, in real life classes as well, that sets them up to understand how the system works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so have a look at that. Parents who are interested in developing a transcript, that's a skill. It took me, a few kids to kind of get the hang of it, but do not leave to chance that you're going to remember everything that they studied,
Oh yeah.
right, in 4 years.
The
So
current.
yeah, that way, yeah, keep the records. What I did was I developed this worksheet with the idea being that you print out 4 years worth of it. So that's about 7 or 8 pages long. Develop one for each grade. Put the year that you're studying on, put grade 9, 2019, 2020, put the child's name, put those 4 years in a duotang,
Mm-hmm.
and then write down everything, right? Because almost everything they do can become part of a course,
Of course.
right? And so sometimes you need to combine things and develop things into a course. Obviously, their core things are going to be, fairly well established. Either you're teaching them a curriculum or they're using a curriculum and that becomes the course. But say, for example, they do a lot of hiking, they do some first aid courses, they do, some horseback riding. You can develop that into an outdoor education course, right? And that can become one of their electives. So, there's many, many things that can be developed into courses, or home economics, or,
Right.
applied skills, that sort of thing.
Yeah, great advice.
Yeah.
I mean, keeping it ongoing, right? You don't want to leave it like,
Oh,
if you just try
then
to
you're
remember
scrambling.
all,
Yeah.
you won't be remembering it all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I want to follow up these blog posts. I want to do some live classes, um, and address some of this on my podcast. There'll also be sometime at the end of July or beginning of August, so post the your conference, there is going to be sort of a panel discussion for high school. I don't know the details of that yet. I'm involved in the panel,
Okay.
but maybe I can share that link with you.
Yes, please share
Yeah.
that information. That would be awesome.
Okay.
And also, continuously, I want to offer the parents who are here, a membership site where they can actually, maybe in the future, you might come back and do another workshop or something, right?
Yeah,
You
that would
really
be
need to go
awesome.
into a little bit detail. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Because there's just a lot, right?
Yeah, and asking the questions. It's really important that this kind of thing is happening, because guaranteed, if you have a question, somebody else has it.
Yeah.
And so that's actually the sort of, was telling you when we talked earlier that I started a podcast recently, and the main premise of the podcast is I solicit questions from people, so they give me questions and I try and answer them, because we have these burning questions, right? And everybody has them. So what is this going to look like? And especially now with this huge influx of homeschooling because of COVID. And that's a beautiful thing. It's nice to know people who've sat on the fence and wondered if they can homeschool for a long time are now thinking, okay, I can do this. Look at me, and this has been good for our family. So yeah, I'd like to try it out,
Yes, yes. And that's
So
the whole mission behind this summit, is to bring that curated information to them as a, starting point, right? If
exactly.
if you're on the fence, it's okay to try
And get
it.
your questions, find places to get your questions answered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The next thing I want to ask is, how do you build strong relationship? Because you say that it's the foundation for success
Yeah.
in education. So how do you build that?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a really big question.
Yeah.
So I will answer it, in its short form, but it
Yes.
is a big question. Uh, when we are interacting with our children, the main thing that we need to avoid is using carrot and stick, rewards and consequences.
Yeah.
I think this is the biggest modern undermining of relationship that we're experiencing in our culture. Okay. Most of us practice carrot and stick, reward and consequence type parenting, because I think how we've ended up there, Kohila, is that we don't want to be lenient, and we don't want to be harsh parents. And so somehow we find that the sort of the carrot and stick idea is kind of a halfway point between those two extremes, right? But really, what carrot and stick, reward and consequence is a form of coercion. Okay. And coercion must, by definition, undermine the relationship, right? Because you are applying pressure to get what you want. So we can see how if we take coercion and look at it in the bigger picture, right, and label it correctly, we call it rewards and consequences, but it is coercion. And if you are coercing somebody in your spousal relationship, in your relationship with other adults, if you try to coerce other adults, you are undermining that relationship. That's really obvious to us as parents, right? Or if we feel we're being coerced, even in an employer-employee relationship, if we feel our boss is coercing us, that will absolutely make us not trust our boss. We want our children to feel safe with us. We want them to trust us. And we don't want to put wedges into our relationships that make it difficult, if not impossible, to move forward in our relationship with our kids, right? If they don't trust us, if they don't feel safe with us, it's going to be really hard to teach them anything, okay? The person that has had the most impact in my life on that idea way back when we first started having kids is Gordon Neufeld, who's a psychologist out of Vancouver. He's co-written a book called Hold On to Your Kids. And I would say it's probably one of the best books that you could read in developing a foundation for understanding why coercion will undermine your relationship with your child and what to do instead, okay? It's an excellent book, and I highly recommend reading it. It's not super accessible, I would say, for parents with really young kids. I would say you're going to be able to apply its practical theories, practical application better with older kids. But there has been a book written by another author and speaker who's also fantastic. Her name is Judy Arnall. And Judy has written a book called Discipline Without Distress, as well as several other excellent books. And she has her website, I believe it's called Professional Parenting. But if you type in Judy Arnall in a Google search, all her things will come up. Arnall is Arnall. And she really, her Discipline Without Distress is more geared at younger kids. So if you don't know what to do, instead of coercion, instead of carrots and sticks, rewards and consequences, she will say, okay, here's a situation. She's got a troubleshooting guide almost, right? Here's a situation. How do I respond? Instead of the threat or the reward that I was going to throw at you, what's another way of approaching this situation, right? It's a golden book for kids. She's actually the person who's going to be doing this high school panel later on. Will be hosting it. And fantastic in terms of developing your relationship with your child. So, I have a lot to say about that particular topic. I could talk about it for hours. My workshop video that I mentioned earlier on, the whole underpinning of that video is relationship first. How do we teach our kids with that, using that paradigm? So that would be helpful for parents as well. But the theory behind that is going to be addressed much better in those books and why it matters so much. And there's lots of other resources out there. But I think that's a really good starting point for parents.
All the books and stuff you're mentioning, I'm going to actually curate them and put them into the portal so the parents will have one place,
let's make it easy. Oh my gosh, it's just so it's a big decision, right? Let's make it easy.
Yeah, easy. The next thing I want to ask about, when you say make joy normal,
right?
What do you mean by that when you say that?
Well, I think my main, I mean a lot of things. It's a power-packed expression for me.
Yes.
But I think the main thing is, if your relationships are solid, if your goal is joy, you're much more likely to attain that. I think we live in a world that, stress is sort of a pandemic, and the more, first world you are, the more of a pandemic stress is. And so, we live in this, sadly, the situation where people are sort of rushing through life, stressed out all the time, feeling anxious about everything. And if our goal is to make joy normal, it changes our worldview, I think. That how is it that I can operate my life, simplify my life, simplify my relationships, make my relationships the priority? How can I do that in such a way that joy is the normal state in which my life runs? And so there are many, many ways to do that and many ways to address that. And, I'm just trying from all angles that I know to present the ways in which we can experience joy as our normal state of affairs, right? Simplifying our life is another really huge category that I like to address in my talks, and simplifying education, simplifying, the way we live, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, make joy normal, make it
Normal.
your goal.
You were exactly correct on, before pre-COVID, we were all rushing. Life was just kind of going faster and faster.
Yeah.
Right? It was after holiday came after holiday, like we were just going from one to another.
Yeah.
But this seemed to me, even for many people, is like a pause and then reflect.
And a reset. Yeah.
Reset.
What have I been doing? Just time to breathe, and time to, it's really interesting because, even when you're driving, people are driving slower. I don't know. I've noticed that on the streets, people are driving slower. They're moving slower. And it's such a beautiful thing to see, and my dad made a comment that I thought was very poignant. He said, things are kind of like 50 years ago, where stores weren't open every night. Stores weren't open on Sundays. People didn't take their car out as much. It was a bigger deal to go out shopping. You planned your shopping for one day so that you weren't running out every day of the week. You'd had less activities, and it's just, everything just feels slower. And I hope that that's the great life lesson learned through COVID, and I know it's, for many people, it's been a time of anxiety and difficulty, but if that's our takeaway, then we have to consider it a real blessing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I can feel it.
Yeah.
Life is much smooth, like there is uncertainty for sure, right? But with change, with this kind of change, you just have to look at the positive side, right? Whatever is positive. Positive.
Exactly.
So what's your advice for parents who are on the fence, maybe, thinking about it, they're doing their research, they're on summits like this and gathering information. What would your advice be to start a homeschooling or not?
Right. Okay. Well, I would say first, I'll speak to them directly for a moment if they're listening, is dear, sweet, dear, wonderful parents. What we know is that you love your kids dearly and you want the best for them. And really, you're the only one who can discern what's best for your kids. If you're on the fence about homeschooling, I would suggest just give it a try, right? Nothing is carved in stone. If you decide this year you're going to homeschool, give it a try. Relax into it, enjoy it. Your kids are not going to suffer, even if all you did was read to them for a year and did the absolute basics with them. They're not going to suffer. If you only had a year left with your children for whatever reason, think about how you might spend that year with them, and I can guarantee it wouldn't be haranguing them about homework. You would spend lovely, joyful moments with them, reading to them, playing outdoors with them, discovering and wondering, and giving them the very best you have to offer. So approach this year that way, and then from there decide, do I want to continue this?
Yes, absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. And I will make sure I get all the resources for the parents into the portal so they know where to get everything.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Kohila.
Thank you.